Hey,
Hi,
how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm really good, really
Good.
good. Dude, I just want to say I'm super glad that you wanted to get together and we could have this chat because I've been thinking the world is a crazy place. There's a lot going on, and I want to learn a little bit about it, and I think part of that starts with talking to each other.
Yeah, I have to tell you, I was really excited when you brought this up. Hey girl, hi. Love you.
She said,
I
"Love
was
you."
really I love you too. I was really excited when you brought this up. I thought this is a great idea. And then I got a little unnerved because and I think I mentioned this in another post, but this is a taboo conversation.
It really is.
I mean, people don't do this. Like you and I are acquaintances, and we don't really know each other that well, so it's kind of a leap of faith, I think, because we both love and adore Kelsey, which
Right.
is good enough for me, by the way, because that's how much I think of her. But I did kind of get a little unnerved. I thought, what have I done? Because I was nervous that if we did post it, there's a lot of people out there that can be vicious, right? And I just want to be able to ask some really open and honest questions and get a different perspective. But sometimes that can be vilified.
I agree. I think anytime you hold an opinion that is opposite of someone else, they're gonna kind of dig in their heels or what have you, and they might get mad from something you say. But that's not what I'm here about. What I want to do is I want to get to know you. I want to work through some of these ideas that I feel people in society aren't taking that leap of faith and doing. Or
Yeah,
they're assuming what the other person thinks or assuming how the other person is just because they have a difference of opinion. And I don't think that's right. I think
I
let's
don't either.
let's talk it out.
So, so in the event that we do post this and share it with others, do you want to kind of preface what kind of prompted the video?
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, do you want to start with like your posts and things like that, or how do you?
Yeah, I mean, I can start by saying that I posted something relevant to um, the tragedy of what happened to George Floyd and the protesting and the looting, and we had words, so they were strong, but that's okay. I you know I'm thick-skinned, and that's all good. But we had then a conversation between the two of us that let's talk. Let's not let's not post messages back and forth. Let's actually have a dialogue, because I had lots of questions that you said, okay, whoa, whoa, whoa. Let's talk about this, because just hearing those questions can sound insensitive. And look, I get it. They did. So that's why we had this video.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I think there's a lot of things here. Like I know that I know in your heart you're not an evil person. You're not a racist person. I
Right.
would never, you know what I mean? I would never think that of you. Um, it's just I have a lens based on my experiences, and therefore, things I see, I'm going to perceive a certain way because of that,
Yeah.
whether it's right or wrong. I think that's true of
Right.
all of us.
There was something that you said that really struck me, and that was that you were so frustrated because people weren't really talking and getting to the root cause. And I thought, he's absolutely right. I don't know how comfortable I would feel having that conversation about the root cause, but I'm avidly interested in hearing what you think is the root cause.
For sure, for sure. And, I think it's interesting because oftentimes when people get in those like Facebook battles, they want to kind of prove their point, and that's why I wanted to do this. But I think it's not about proving your point. I think it's about finding the truth. Let's get to that root, like you
Yeah,
said,
yeah,
and
agree. Wholehearedly.
yeah, you'll
And
see information. I see information. The
yeah,
media has a lot to do with that, and
uh-huh,
that's a whole other issue. You know what I
totally
mean?
started.
Right,
Yeah,
right. So
yeah.
yeah. So again, I'm glad. Like I said, I hope no one watching or that does watch this that's friends with me has anything bad to say about Sherri, and I hope
Yeah,
the same is
yeah,
true. From your
absolutely. Yeah.
perspective, because that's we're
I
seeking to
just,
learn.
my friends were like, this is cool.
Yeah, same, same.
Yeah. Yeah,
Cool.
this is kind of cool. So can you kind of share with me your feelings about root cause, since that was one of the things that you said frustrated you the most? Because I want to hear it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. So, um, one of the things that gets brought up kind of in this argument often, it seems, is, you know, there are these issues that exist in the world. They're not necessarily exclusive to the Black community, or, they are trending on the decline. Why can't we look at that as, kind of reality and move forward from there? And I'm like, maybe that is the case right now. The problem is, I think a lot of people, when you have a hammer, you see every problem as a nail, right? So if you have faced injustice historically over time, it's probably likely that you're going to look at situations through that lens and be like, oh, here we go again,
Yeah.
type of situation.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I really wanted to investigate, why is it that there's so much tension that exists between, Black and white, especially, and everyone knows, oh, okay, slavery. So, but it's like, what are all these, other things
Yeah.
that we can work through? Because you ever hear about like Indian on Indian crime or like Asian on Asian
Right.
crime? You
Right.
know what I mean? Like it's something that you don't hear about. So I've
Yeah.
been kind of trying to dive in and start and learn where those things started. So you have the Civil War, and you have the laws that came into being after that. The Jim Crow era and things like that. And
Yeah.
um, I think the Jim Crow era led to a period of uh, where a lot of African Americans didn't have the same opportunities, when it came to housing, when it came to the availability of jobs and things. And so a lot of things that, you know, Caucasian counterparts could pass down over generations, in terms of wealth, in terms of opportunity, we didn't have those same opportunities. And it seems to me that that has compounded over time. I think we are at a place where it's getting a lot better. You do have a lot of wealth in the Black community. You do have a lot of role models to look to. I mean, heck, you have Madam C.J. Walker in 1902, who had a 20,000 square foot mansion as a Black woman, you know,
That's
but
cool.
it's cool, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so,
I don't know. I haven't heard of her.
yeah, yeah. So we'll have to keep a list of like, different things we know
I
and
know.
share
I
them with
know.
each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like,
But ironically, prior to the 60s, um, the unemployment for Blacks and whites was actually equal.
really?
Yeah, it wasn't, the disparity wasn't there. So it's interesting, what it was, what I call the pre-60 eras as to compared to the post. So,
Okay.
but continue, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. But yeah, I just there are those opportunities of people who looked in the face of whatever the controversy was, whatever their situation and circumstances were, and said, I don't care. I'm going to do this. I'm going to get rich. I'm going to use this
Yeah,
opportunity. But there also were these law, actual legislation in place that said, hey, you're Black, you're not going to be able to vote. And things like that
yeah.
lasted over time. Poll taxes and things like that. And I think that just compounded. Um,
And
and
remember, I wasn't allowed to vote for a while too.
yep, was it the 19th Amendment?
I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. That's so.
The ERA?
Say what?
Is it the ERA, Equal Rights Amendment?
I think
I'm
women's
going to show
suffrage.
my governmental disaptitude.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, but I don't think either of us here are claiming to be experts, right?
No, we're not
you know.
experts, but yeah, but to your point, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I think there's just a lot of things throughout history that led to um, all this tension and all these these differences, and I think it's just causing problems that we need to solve. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Where do you think that the root is?
This is going to be tough for me because I do have opinions.
Yeah.
Um, and I feel really strongly that when you take, so Thomas Sowell, when I started studying economics, my major was business management at Earlham College in Indiana. And so, trust me, I cried all through economics. I wasn't a great student, but I did my best. But Thomas Sowell was my guy. He was the one that I listened to. And I found some of his videos, and I didn't even know he was Black. I had no idea. But anyway, Thomas Sowell talks a lot about welfare states. And I think I mentioned this, and so this might, so when I talk about this, I'm talking from a matter factual viewpoint. So some people might consider this insensitive. I'm not being insensitive. I'm just sharing what I know, right? And you're more than welcome to correct me, right?
Yeah.
But and I don't know your background. I have no idea how you were raised or by whom or under what circumstances. But so Thomas Sowell says that when you have a welfare state, and remember, there's not just welfare states here in the United States, but there's welfare states in Western Europe as well. They have all had the same conclusions, and that is when we started, there was 25% of Black children being born out of wedlock. And then we knocked on all these Black women's doors and said, we want to help you. But, you know, is there a man in the house? And so we incentivized these women to not necessarily get married and have the nuclear family. And, you know, say what you will, and I have nothing against, don't get me wrong, if you're on welfare, I don't think less of you. However, there are some statistical, factual evidence. You're closer to crime. You have more police contact. You're more likely to get arrested. You're more likely to commit a crime because of welfare. Okay, and to me, it's a vicious cycle. Once, and I always tell, I was a sales manager, a marketing executive, and I always said, people do what they're paid to do. It's human nature. It's just what they are. So what Thomas Sowell has said is that as soon as the nuclear family fell apart, that's when, you know, the crime increased. And it's not just true in the United States, but you can look in France and you can see the exact same thing happening. So I kind of feel like the Democrats don't talk about it because that was their thing. That was their program. Because you remember Lyndon Johnson was a crusty old Republican until he decided to become a Democrat and start the welfare state. But they don't really want to talk about it because then they have to admit that, you know, it didn't work, right? And so I see that as the premise and the root cause.
Yeah.
Or one of them.
I definitely think it is a problem. And I think, you know, with that too, you incentivize people to just stay in that state, because when you give people things, they typically, you know, want to keep receiving those things, and you get them dependent on that. And I think that's detrimental to drive. I think that's, you know, detrimental to, you know, any type of outcome that can be had by people. And so I agree with you there. I think that is. You know,
why would I go out and work? It's so hard to be a single parent. Why would I go out and work and not make as much as I could if I was home taking care of my kids and my family and watchdogging them and making sure that they're doing the things that they need to do and get paid by the state.
Right.
I mean, I get it.
And I think you're right. You know, Democrats they don't want to necessarily admit that that's, you know, a thing that they did. But I think, like, you know, many pieces of legislation and many people throughout history, there've been a lot of things that were well-intentioned where the impact, you know, didn't really turn out the way it was.
Right.
I kind of think the same thing. I mean, it's a totally different subject, and you probably have pretty strong feelings about it, but I feel the same thing about the Affordable Care Act. I think it was, you know, well-intentioned piece of legislation, but, you know, perhaps the outcome wasn't, you know, what people envisioned, which is a whole different thing. But, you know,
right.
Yeah. But I do have a question. Are you familiar with the concept of redlining at all?
Refresh my memory, because it sounds familiar, but I can't say that I can explain it off the top of my head.
Yeah, and like I don't necessarily like claim to be an expert on it. It was just something that I, you know, kind of learned about as I'm, you know, looking to learn about these different things. But there was the National Housing Act of 1934 that came about, and like basically that's when 30-year mortgages became a thing, and
Oh
fixed
yes, I'm
interest
quite
rates.
aware of Boston Democrats and how that all came about. Yes,
Right.
I'm familiar with that.
Yeah. And so they created these things called residential security maps to make
Yes.
sure that, people could,
Yes.
pay back their loans and things like that. Well,
Mm-hmm.
they had the green zones where things were good, the yellow zones where they're like, maybe we'll lend these people, maybe we won't. And what's, the
Red
red
zones.
zones. And
Completely aware of what you're talking about now. Yeah. Okay.
yeah. And so, I think that's a huge problem as well, because some of the stipulations of those red zones were, black and brown people. That
Sure.
was, yeah. And what that led to was a situation where, you had these people who couldn't get their homes refinanced. They couldn't get
Yeah.
loans. They couldn't
Yeah.
buy property. And, they're then forced to live in these areas that, aren't necessarily the greatest. And they kind of get worse over time. Whereas, others who are allowed to, get these loans and have this home ownership can pass that wealth down, over time, and, kind of keep that generational wealth going. Well, with that, with property ownership comes property taxes, which contributes to education, right? And so the higher your property taxes, the more money that goes to your schools. More money that goes to your schools, better education in your community. Better the education in your community, better, the property values go up.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's been a cyclical thing. And I think that's a huge cause as well. While I don't disagree that, welfare is a problem, I think there are so many other factors like that that have been, detrimental. I know one thing that you brought up.
You do know that that was addressed, and actually it was the Democrats in Boston that kind of pounded their fists and said that this isn't equal. We have to have, everyone needs to have the right to own their home and so forth, and have the same level. Home ownership is important to this country and to individuals, right?
Yeah.
What happened is that they went way too far. Instead of asking the questions, and getting, it's like the Democrats said, you don't have to ask any questions. Anybody can get any loan because housing should be a right. Everybody should be able to have a right. And so what ended up happening is people were getting loans on homes that they couldn't afford.
So kind of like the subprime mortgage crisis.
But yeah, I mean, a lot of that had to do with what happened in the recession. Everything kind of fell apart. And so, look, I could be wrong, but I think that they had a great intentions, just like you said, wonderful intentions. But sometimes we just forget to ask the questions, compared to what, how much is it going to cost, and how you're going to pay for it. And those should be questions that you ask. Everyone should have to be able to qualify for their loan, right?
Yeah.
Now, should they be disqualified because of the color of their skin, or because the zone wasn't one in which the bank was willing to take a risk if they foreclosed? I don't think so. But I think that good intentions, to your point, that's a great example of good intentions that went awry.
Yeah, and it's just I think it did have quite the negative impact, because I think it was a period of 30 years that 98% of FHA loans were given to white borrowers only. And so It's just, I mean, how do you, I guess it's kind of like the credit debacle, right? Like when you come up and you need to get a credit card, but you can't get a credit card because you don't have credit history. I feel like that's kind of been an issue. It's like, how can Black people get ahead and, own property and things like that if people won't give them the chance because they're not qualified because they haven't owned property? And,
So let me ask you about you personally. What have found any, like, have you or anyone that you know currently had issues?
In terms of like housing specifically, or?
Yeah, just where they looked at the color of your skin and said,
Me personally, I haven't.
Yeah.
I've heard stories, but again, it's hearsay. I can't necessarily corroborate those. But
Yeah.
I've been fortunate in my life's path that I've had jobs that were pretty good. I went to Butler University. Kind of give you a little bit of my background.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. Started in international management. Finished with a degree in science, technology, and society. Changed my major. Worked for Batesville Casket Company for a while in their technology division, doing sales, and then went into HR, and that's kind of where I've landed since then.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And so I've been fortunate. I've had good jobs. Kelsey and I have, flourished as partners, and we've been able to, um, kind of create this life that we have with our little house and things like that. So
Right, right.
never had any trouble myself.
Good, good. Were you, out of curiosity, were you born in a nuclear family?
So actually, my mom and dad didn't stay together. My dad went on to remarry. He lives in Washington, D.C. I grew up with my mom. It was just me and my mom.
Yeah. Well, as you know, I don't know, maybe you don't know, but my kids didn't, I left, my husband and I got divorced. So, and I got remarried, and then we were in a blended family with 5 kids, and that's a whole nother story. But anyway, so yeah, families are complicated. I do want to bring something up that I was watching on the news, and it kind of broke my heart, and I wanted to bring it up on this conversation. And that is it was a protester, and she was protesting very lovely. I mean, no looting. She was just really there with the right message, right? And so the reporter asked her, she said, what are you here for? What is the message? And she said, well, my message is this, and that is, I want to be protected. I want to know I'm safe, just as much as a white person is safe. I want to make sure that brown and black alike are just as safe as a white person. And, and she had tears in her eyes, and she really broke my heart. And so this is where I think you and I kind of had differences of opinions as to root cause. And so I want to talk a little bit about that, if I may. And that is that the Washington Post, and I don't know if you know this or not, but they actually maintain a database on how many people are killed by cops every year. Mm-hmm. And it's about 1,000. 1,000 people get killed by cops every year. And when you kind of, break that down, 80 to 90% of those shootings by cops are considered justified because the perpetrator was armed and dangerous, right? So that's 80 to 90% of 1,000 people. So, there is a subset of people that are black unarmed men that are killed by cops. And it's kind of a wide margin, but for the last several years, it's been anywhere from 15 to 40 black men, unarmed, killed by cops. That's a problem, and it deserves scrutiny, right? Mm-hmm. I would think.
Right.
And I mean, you can sit here and you can think about, the names. I mean, we've got Michael Brown.
Yep.
Trayvon Martin. He wasn't really killed by a cop. He was killed by someone that was acting like a cop.
Right. Yeah. Philando Castillo.
Sandra Bland.
Yep.
I mean, these are all names that we can think of that were unarmed black people that were killed by cops, right? So here's what the Washington Post and the media doesn't share, and that is twice as many unarmed white people are killed by cops every year. Twice as many than black. Name one.
I think that's a problem too. And again, it goes back. I think one thing that we agree on is that the media is not good for all of us and shapes this narrative that divides us. So
yes.
I think,
and if there's a message out there, I don't care who you listen to, they are skewed, they are biased, and they are politically charged. And I think that I think that's part of the root cause.
Same. Everyone has an agenda, and they're trying to divide us to do their bidding. And I for one, won't let it happen, which, is why I want to talk to you in the first place.
Right.
But actually,
so let me finish my point.
Yeah,
so,
I'm sorry.
So my heart is broken for this young lady, but I don't think she understands the stats, right? I don't think she has the facts, and nobody's telling her. Nobody. And Roland Fryer, he's like the youngest black tenured professor at Harvard. He did a study on the disproportionate amount of violence against blacks. And he had a thesis, he had a hypothesis, right? And so, it's human nature that it usually goes that way. He was floored by his findings, and that was that there's not a disproportionate amount of violence against blacks as opposed to whites. There's just not. So a study out of University of Washington, which proved out that white cops are less likely to pull their gun out if the suspect is black because they're so afraid of racial profiling. So I'm wondering if the problem isn't as much individual motivations, like I'm racist and you're black, so I'm going to pull my gun out on, I'm going to, and let me tell you what, that's exactly what happened to George Floyd. What happened to him was heinous and awful and inexcusable. I think the coroner said he wasn't asphyxiated, but I don't think that matters.
Yeah, we watched it though,
We watched it, right? Well, when you say you can't breathe, you can breathe, but I don't think that matters. I think what that police officer did was beyond the pale. It was heinous and it was evil. He had his hands in his pocket, acting like, what a smug douche canoe. I mean, what a horrible human being. And he had a history of being violent. So regardless, they are bringing in, the family did hire a second, a doctor, or what do they call it? Just left my mind. Coroner. I think he did Weinstein, and so he's going to give a second opinion. So I'm very eager to hear what he has to say. It'll be interesting to see if that aligns. But it doesn't matter. Totally, I think that he should pay, and I think the cops that stood there should pay. But I'm looking at this little girl, and I'm just thinking, wow, I just wish I could call you up on the phone and say, maybe the conversation is valid, but maybe it's not individuals. Maybe it's almost institutional, because Columbus, Ohio they have some institutional questions about their police force. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
And are you near Columbus?
I live in Lewis Center, which is right north of downtown. I actually go to physical therapy downtown at Ohio State right now.
Okay. So I don't know, and I have to look into that more, but in terms, there's a police public contact survey that's done every 2 to 3 years where third parties go out and they interview people that had police interactions. And every year it comes back that these people are saying that they can't, there's no evidence that they were mistreated because of, by anyone, because of the color of their skin. So I just wish that more people knew that. And then when you look, and I don't take this personally, and sometimes when I say these things, I feel like Black people cringe, and I'm not saying it because I'm insensitive. I'm saying it because to me they're facts, and facts aren't racist, right? The facts are the facts, and they help us to figure out what the problems are. How can we fix the problem if we really haven't fully uncovered it? So when you think about it, Blacks kill twice as many whites every year. They kill around 500, whites kill 250 Blacks, all right? So we got 13% of the population committing 50% of the murders. And then when you take a look at that, 50% of the murders by Blacks are committed by young Black men. So then when you drill that down, it's 3% of the population responsible for 50% of the murders. So to me, I'm thinking, what is happening with our young Black men? How can we save their souls? Just think, if we honed in on that and had those kinds of conversations, that could eliminate 50% of the murders in the United States. That's huge.
I think there's a lot to unpack with that statistic, and I think you're right. There's a problem there. Again, back to the media. One of the big problems that I have. So you look at rap music, you look at rap videos, right? And what do you see? You see guns, you see violence, you see all these things. And I've had friends that I've met, white guys from small rural towns, who've told me that, man, before I met you, before I got to college, I thought all Black people were bad, because all I saw was the news, and all I saw was, what was on, these music videos. And, it took actually meeting someone to, kind of break that stereotype. So I think that's very unfortunate. We're doing people a disservice. So not only do you have, potentially this huge problem amongst young black men committing these crimes, which again, like I said, that's the whole thing to unpack there. We could get into that. But, not
Yeah.
only do you have, that issue, you also have the way they're being portrayed, in the media and things like that. So
Yeah.
it's like almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a sense. So
You
it's,
know, when I was in college, I took this class, and it's funny that I can remember this class because I'm 55 years old, and it was a long time ago. But and I was a freshman in college. In my first year, I went to Indiana State, and then I went to Earlham. I finished out my sophomore year through senior at Earlham. But anyway, I took this class, and it was basically, you are what you were then. And it taught you how to look at how you were raised and how that affected your perceptions of life. And I thought about this so many times since that class, I can't even tell you. It was so impactful, and it was all based upon empirical evidence of what you went through and how that has impacted, your perceptions of people and life and so forth. But anyway, I think about this because when I was raised up, we didn't have a lot of Black people in our rural community. Maybe we had 3 that I can think of off the top of my head. And they were lovely individuals, lovely families. Very, one family had particularly very popular people in the school, and they were very much entrenched, and they were lovely, lovely human beings. And I think about how that has impacted me and how I've seen that because of that family. And I hope they know what a healing they don't even know from a community standpoint how important they were to these people, and because that changed, that didn't change, that developed and created our perspectives on people. So when I went to Atlanta, I was all excited because I wanted my kids to be raised in a diverse city. I wanted them to have, meet lots of different people. I always told them, we judge people on the content of their character, not the color of their skin. And they did not have, they had some bad experiences early on. And I think about that class and how that affected them. And I won't tell the stories because they're not mine to tell. But nevertheless, I'm so saddened that they didn't have the luck, they didn't have the luck. I don't know if it's luck, but they didn't have the experience that I had being around such wonderful, wonderful people, because that kind of early on skewed their perception. If they saw you on the street, they might be fearful of you, or they might, I don't know.
I think that is the same thing. We talk about this police brutality problem. I think it's the same thing with Black people as well when they see police. There has been this history of police brutality. There were instances of, whole police forces being members of the Ku Klux Klan and not following any type of protocol whatsoever when harassing people. And, I have grandparents that remember some of these things. And, these are stories that are told at the dinner table. So,
the story of your grandfather coming to Centerville, that was lovely, by the way. And I met him.
It was a moment.
He's precious. He's adorable. I mean, yeah. I'm sure he would appreciate those, but he was lovely. I found him to be lovely.
That's good. Yeah, he's a great guy, and I'm glad, he got to have that life experience because, he had experiences that shaped his perception as well. And he wasn't necessarily fond of, people who weren't Black, because he's like, these people are treating me terrible my whole life. Like, why would I treat them any better? And I think that's what happens to a lot of us and why we get these biases, And, that's why we got to break down these barriers and really start to realize that it's not a color thing. It's not a police thing. It's not anything. It's there are good people and there are bad people.
Yeah. I think that's spot on.
But I do want to.
But I think that we're led to believe by the media that I think the Black people are led by certain politicians to believe that they need to be protected because they're to a degree victims.
There's this whole framework that one of my friends, Larry Gordon, smart guy, he's telling me about. I read a book recently that talks about this cult of victimology and this whole mindset of if you believe that you're the victim, you're going to continue to act like you're the victim. And you're never, it's kind of like the crabs in the bucket thing too. You see someone, calling out and trying to, better themselves, then they get made fun of. Like for instance, growing up, because I went to a private elementary school and I talked the way I do, I talked white, according to some of my friends in the neighborhood. Or, it was this thing where it was like I was made fun of for pursuing an education, for my mom and my family, giving me this opportunity. I think that's prevalent with a lot of people, though.
Yeah.
I don't think it's just black thing. I mean, heck, you own a business, correct? Or at some point?
No, I've not owned a business. My husband owns a business.
Okay, husband. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like when people are getting businesses started, their friends doubt them as well. They're like, oh, look at them, trying this, and they don't really support you. You think your circle will support you, right? But it's until you kind of break away and get support from outside your circle that your circle comes in, which is so like counterintuitive, right?
Very counterintuitive, yeah.
But
it's very funny because I think that the assumption very often is that I married my husband who owns his own business, and that's why I have things. But I was very successful in business, and people don't, like, I bought this house by myself.
Yeah, and that wasn't the assumption I was making. It was just
no.
Yeah.
I know. I'm right there with you. I get it, because you know how you were telling the story. I really love the story you told about some gentleman, white gentleman, coming over to your frat house, and you were all sitting around talking, and they looked at you and they said, "You are here on scholarship."
Yeah. I was kind of zoned out because I mean, I'm 21, 22. We were tailgating. These old guys are telling us stories. I'm kind of like, whatever, looking around. And then, I kind of tune in and I hear, well, you're probably on scholarship. And I was like,
yeah.
What? I'm 5'6". At the time, I didn't really work out that much. So I'm skinny. I'm like, what do you think I play here? The only teams we have are a basketball team and a football team. I don't look like I do either of those, so it was just, I was like, man, it's tough for people to see you and make those assumptions about you,
Right.
I'm sure you faced that as a woman,
You remember when you told the story about being outside of your apartment, so you just got to campus, and a young woman and her parents walked by and you kind of waved because you recognized her from one of your classes or something, and then all of a sudden the police were like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
Why are you loitering or something like that?
Yeah, so like, it was so weird. So yeah, we're standing on the side. I forgot my ID and I had to go let a friend in, another black guy. And so I go down, I go to get him. I'm like, oh crap, I forgot my ID. So I call someone to let us in, and we're standing by the back door. Well, this girl who I have class with and see every day is walking by with her parents, and I'm like, oh, wave at her. I'm like, hey, we let us in. And she just kind of like looked at me and like glanced away, and then like her dad like whispered something to her, and they walked a different direction. I'm like, okay, maybe they forgot something. I didn't think anything of it at the time. We get inside the building by the time my friend comes, and walking in, and I see all these police rush in. It's like 4 officers, and what's going on? This was it was a low traffic time. It was literally like me and this other person. I'm like, there's nothing happening that would warrant this right now, I don't think. Like, I didn't see anybody come in. And, Butler's a university of 4,400 students, right? It's a small university. Everyone knew each other. That's including grad students too. So anyway, I'm there and it's just us. And I go to the one police officer that's in the lobby. And I'm like, hey, like, what's going on? Should I be concerned? What's going on? And he's like, oh yeah, we got a call. There's some suspicious black guys walking around the building. He's like, have you seen anything? I'm like, well, no. I think that was us. Actually, thinking back to what just happened, I'm like, man, I can't believe they called the cops on us. We go here.
Yeah. But to my point, if my kids were young, my kids are adults now, and they wouldn't have they've had the experiences that they've matured out of that, of their earlier perceptions. That as younger children walking past you, they might be afraid. They might have been afraid based upon some experiences that they had. It's just you just don't know what other people have been through, and that college course, You Are What You Were When, has been proven to be true over and over and over, and that it kind of takes a lifetime to break free of some of those preconceived ideas of, life.
It does. Actually, I go to therapy, mental therapy. I broke my neck. I'm paralyzed now. It's a tough life,
Yeah.
so need to talk it
Yeah.
out. But that's one of the things that we talk about is, when you have those first experiences, how much they imprint on you because they form your lens, at that moment. It's like, the first experience that you have with a Black person is probably going to shape your perception of Black people because that first experience. Just like the first
Right.
experience that you had with a cab driver in New York is going to shape your experience of cab drivers in New York. Different things like that. So it takes having a number of these different experiences
Yeah.
to really get a full view. And it also takes, I think, all of us to be positive representatives of the subgroup that we represent. And I think that just goes towards being a good person in general,
Yeah, because think about these people that I was raised up with that were the very few Black people in our community, and how they shaped an entire community's, Black people are lovely. What do you, and in my household, you were never allowed to say the N-word. It was like a 4-letter word. And however, man, you come down here to the South, where my husband was raised in Macon, Georgia. My goodness, it's like going
different.
back years, and it's just shocking and disturbing. And so I think that there are definitely pockets in the country that are kind of scary. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, it is. And actually, I had to used to travel to Lincoln, Alabama for work. One of our plants for Honda's down there, and I would go teach classes at our different locations. And man, just the amount of small town thinking that I saw was very, very interesting, and it was
Yeah,
kind of like going back in time. But
yeah.
you know,
And that's nothing against Macon, Georgia. So if anybody's from Macon,
right,
Georgia,
right,
yeah.
for sure. I did want to talk about one thing though. You brought up
Okay.
some of those statistics about victims being majority white of police brutality and things like that.
Yeah, yeah.
I think to that point, I have a problem with police brutality in general. As a Black
Yes.
man, I have uh, kind of a micro lens within that because I have a problem with police brutality against Blacks as well. But I don't want a police officer to hurt you, just like I don't want a police officer to hurt me or anyone I'm related to. And that's not to say that I dislike law enforcement. I have a bunch of wonderful people in my life who are in law enforcement. But
Yeah.
at the same time, it's like there is this problem that exists. I looked at that study. It said the majority of the victims were white, but disproportionately Black at 32%, with a fatality rate 2.8 times higher among Blacks than whites. Most victims were reported to be armed. However, Black victims were more likely to be unarmed at 14.8% than white or Hispanic victims. One thing that
Huh.
hurt that I saw that fatality rates among military and active duty service members were 1.4 times greater than among their civilian counterparts. So that's a problem too. These are problems too. So I agree with what you said, where it's like, it seemed dismissive at the time, and I'm sorry for my strong language when I posted. But one of the things that you posted was kind of like, hey, we all have our problems. Let's solve these problems together. And I don't disagree with that at all. The reason I thought it was slightly insensitive was because the focus right now was kind of like the Black
Yeah.
issue. But
Fair.
I do think all of these are problems, and we should be solving these together. You're right. Why are cops killing so many white people too? Why are cops killing so many people?
So what happened to George Floyd, I think, was a crime against humanity. I feel like, and I have every much of a right to be outraged and sickened as you do. I think that was horrific. But I think that there are a lot of people out there that are grossly misinformed about police brutality. And I'm not saying that there's not pockets. And I do question institutional racism in the police departments. I'm not well versed enough to talk about that with any confidence. But I do, if you're going to protest, At least have your facts and at least know what you're doing. And you know what the problem is? People are so busy. People are trying to work jobs and raise families, and they come home and they turn on CNN and they don't have time to I have the luxury of being retired and being able to research information and say, wait a minute, hold on, that doesn't make sense to me. I
Right.
question, I call BS. And so, I mean, that's a luxury that people just don't have today. And that's why I get so mad at the media, because it's kind of like their moral obligation to share this information, and they don't.
They don't. And a lot of stuff has sensationalist headlines that,
Yes,
fan these flames of
clickbait.
division, yeah. And it's like,
Yeah,
what? I think social media, I was talking to friends, I was like, while it could have been one of the best things in the world, it ended up being one of the worst things in the world, because you get to see, all these things that go viral that aren't even necessarily true. All these things
yeah.
that go viral that, are shaping people's opinions that aren't anchored in reality at all. And it's like, how is
Mm-hmm.
this okay? And I think you're right. People are tired. It's like, I've worked all day. These
Yeah.
days you have to have, a 2-person working household in order to survive, it seems like. So it's like, it's like, I just want to hang out with my kids and
No,
and make sure I'm safe. Like,
no, right? Yeah,
uh,
I totally get it. And when you're being told kind of on loop about misinformed facts or misrepresented facts, it's just easy but honestly, the looters to me is someone was trying to make the correlation between the looters and the Boston Tea Party, and I'm like, no, that's cute, but the people threw the tea into the water. They didn't take the tea, and they didn't take it and put it in their garages and sell it later. They, come on, let's be real about that.
oh, for sure. So my thing on that is, I think that viewpoint looks at the looters as the whole of the protesters, and I don't think that's a fair assessment per se. I agree that the Boston Tea Party, it's like they went after exactly what they were going after. In this instance, if you want to riot, I don't believe it's right to riot at all. If you want to riot, go after the institutions that you feel are harming you, not Jan and Dave's camera shop, not the bar down the street that's been there for
Yeah,
30 years or so.
yeah.
um, I do think that one thing that's kind of led to all this is, I don't know if you remember the whole kneeling thing with Colin Kaepernick, and
You and I
everyone.
are going to disagree on this,
I know, I know, I know, I
and
know.
I'm okay with it.
I'm okay with it too, but people called that disrespectful. They called it unpatriotic. They said, don't protest like that. They said,
I
wrong
don't believe
forum.
that. I don't believe that. I think it was ineffective. And that has always been from day one. The only problem I had with it is that it was ineffective. And I thought that it could have been done better and with more hubris than I have a problem with hurting the very organization that supports you. And he hurt his organization. He hurt it did it hurt, it did. So I think that he was fine to do it. I think that the way he did it was ineffective. It could have been a lot better. That's all. But do I find him to be disrespectful? I mean, you know do you find the Confederate flag to be disrespectful? I mean, does that offend you when you see it? I mean, there's some, and you know what, I don't have a Confederate flag because I'm sensitive to other people's feelings, because people have been handed you know a flag because their loved ones lost their lives, and then for you to take a knee during the national so it's perspective, right? I don't know. I struggle with it myself. I'm in conflict, but I think he could have done it more effectively.
I think a lot of us are in conflict, right? That's one problem that I see, is that we look at a lot of issues as binary. It's either good or it's bad, but that's not necessarily the case, and we get distracted by these arguments of good and bad, and we forget to ask why. Why was he kneeling? Maybe he went about it the wrong way, but why was it that he was doing that? And perhaps, I mean, I don't know how you go about it
I
better,
know. I
so
know. Well, no, I had made the comment that he needed to pull together some. I think that his celebrity is huge, and he had friends that were on his side. And why not take those friends and a camera crew and go and miss a game and go to the front steps of the police department or to your governor or to your mayor's office and protest and say no. But well, maybe not during a game, because again, I don't think you should, you know,
Harm the
like for
organization.
instance, you
Yeah.
know, I would never hurt the organization that feeds me. And it's not to say that I kowtow to them, but I feel like I need to be cognizant of my time, and I'm being paid to do something, and that's an important work ethic that I have a hard time getting past. But I think he could have done this so well, and I think he would have had a different outcome. Hey, look though, he made tons of money from Nike, right?
Yep.
And he made really good money. Now nobody will hire him now, but again, he bit the hand that fed him, and that's the consequence. And if he's cool with it, then that's good, you know. But I don't know if he is or not. But you know, I'm in conflict with that too. I struggle with it, but I do think he could have done it more effectively.
And I don't
And then, you
disagree.
know, I've lost friends because of Judge Kavanaugh. You know, I felt like we needed to listen. I have a son, and I don't want people to assume, you know, that he's guilty because somebody makes a claim. And I thought that we needed to honor the process and go through it. And I lost my best friend of 10 years.
Oh wow.
Over that. She said no. She has two. Well, I'm not going to go into that, but nevertheless, it was heart wrenching, and it still kind of affects me today. And I also, she also disagreed with me on calling Kaepernick, but all I said was that I felt like he could have been more effective. But it's funny how people get so militant, you know, and so it's like the whole identity politics, you know, theory. Do you recognize that? Or
I think what happens a lot of times is people equate their values and their beliefs with who they are. And so when you attack their values or what they perceive as, their reality, then it feels like you're attacking them. And I think people dig in. I think that happens on, either side of the coin, because, say for instance, uh, I tell you I believe that Donald Trump is racist. You're probably like, no, I don't see that at all. And and you have all these reasons why you don't think that's the case. But I have a
right?
lot of reasons why I think it
Sure.
is.
Sure.
So um, it's just tough because you we have to coexist, right? And in order to
Mm-hmm.
do so, we have to make these compromises with each other. But there are some that people just aren't willing to compromise on because they feel so strongly about them.
Yeah.
And I wonder why that is in a lot of cases, because I think we get lost in the fight when we could be forging a better future.
Yeah. You know, the economist I was telling you about, Thomas Sowell.
Yep.
He was saying in one of his interviews that there were only two presidents that he had to turn off the TV. He couldn't listen to them. One was Trump, and the other one was Obama. So I could figure, well, at least he's kind of bipartisan. I mean, you know, he wasn't partisan in that respect. He's like, yeah, I can't do it. I couldn't do either one. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh.
Just because we don't agree doesn't mean that I'm attacking, your moral compass or your intrinsic values, but it's crazy right now.
I think one thing that can help remedy some of that is your upbringing and my upbringing are completely different, right? You're white lady. You said you're 55, correct? So you grew up in a completely different time period, had a different set of experiences. So again, we're coming at this from a different lens. And I think what happens is your experiences compound to form your views, right? You have all these experiences over the course of decades that form who you are. Well, the way these paths can differ, it kind of like splits off from, people at one point, and they split off, and they split off, and they split off. And you get so far apart that you realize, oh man, we're on different sides of the aisle on these
Yeah.
things. But I think we need to realize that we all just want a better life. We all just want to, have a healthy family, pursue happiness and, wealth, prosperity, things like that. And you believing what you believe isn't an attack on me per se, unless it is, right? Unless you explicitly say that. So I think intent has a lot to do with it. And a lot of people seem to guess about others' intent. And I think that's what leads to a lot of problems.
Yeah.
If there's a difference, it's like, it would be easy for me to say, oh, Sherri supports Donald Trump. I think Donald Trump is racist. Therefore, I think Sherri's racist. I don't think that's the case at all. That's not even close.
I think that there's a lot of people that do that. I mean, hey, look, there are actual politicians that stand up and say that. That's really sad.
Yeah, it is. But I think it's a shortcut. I think what is really the case is, okay, Sherri supports Donald Trump. I should probably learn to understand why Sherri supports Donald Trump. And Sherri should take a minute to understand why I have a problem with him,
Yeah.
So, and I think once we get to that, then maybe we don't settle on Donald Trump. Maybe we settle on someone completely different that suits both our interests.
You know who I want to be my president?
Who's that?
Candace Owens.
Candace, oh, you like Candace?
Oh, I adore Candace Owens. I want her to be the next president so bad. I support her on Patreon, and I just love her. I love her. I watched her clear back when she was the little black pill, and I think she's an amazing woman.
I think she's
that's my president choice.
She's super smart. She's very logical in her approach. I think her life experience, and a lot of her views don't necessarily line up with the experience that a lot of Black Americans are having, and therefore she's perceived as, not for the team. I think the problem is that it's become a team sport, though, in the first place. So I think we need to recognize that and work on that a little bit as people. But
I also love Joe Rogan. He's a liberal.
I love Joe Rogan.
Do you love him?
I love him. That's my favorite podcast.
Me too.
Yeah.
Did you see Elon Musk when he smoked the joint on the? Was that not hysterical?
That was hilarious.
Oh yes, he is.
Yep.
That just happened.
He caught a lot of flack for that too.
His stock went down. I think it kind of went down a lot. And you know who else I love? I love Dave Rubin. He's a liberal. I love his reports. I watch every one of them. But then I watch Dan Bongino too. So I try to listen to lots of different viewpoints and not be so myopic in a conservative standpoint. I am conservative. I am.
There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that.
Not that it's kind of like religion though. Just because I'm conservative doesn't mean that I aspire to all the conservative ideologies, right?
Right.
So anyway, enough of that. Well, we've been an hour. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Likewise. I think
it's so good to get to know you.
Yeah. And, I would be happy to do this again. I think, there's a lot that we brought up that, could definitely be unpacked a little bit more, but I think it starts here. So, I really appreciate and commend you for, having the willingness to do this. I know, again, you said it's a risk for you. It's a risk for me as well. Some people might perceive me as even sitting down having a conversation with you as not playing for the team or something like that.
Oh,
I want to change that,
Okay, fair enough.
I want to change that. So that's what this is about, Sherri. I really appreciate you.
Appreciate you too.
All right, take care.
Talk to you later.
Yep.